Mistakes will and should happen in your songwriting, but there are some mistakes and pitfalls that some songwriters don't even know that they're making. A lot of songwriters tell me they've got the ideas but struggle to get the song started. So today I am pulling back the curtain on the 4 most common mistakes I see from songwriters that stifle their creativity. And I'll be honest, I don't think I've met a songwriter yet that can't benefit from this information as a reminder from time to time. But before we jump in though, I'm Celine. I've been writing songs now for 3 decades and there is absolutely none of these mistakes that I haven't fell foul of during my time as a songwriter. But I'm here to help share my experience with tips, tricks and techniques I've learned over the years so that you can write more songs. Let's get into it. Hands up who knows all about their inner critic. When you first start writing a song, your inner critic can be your worst enemy. You might think, oh, this line sounds cheesy, or that melody is too simple, but that is the mistake that everyone makes. Every song starts from a rough idea, and that's every Billboard #1, every Spotify song with 1 billion streams. They all started from a raw creative idea. And the quickest way to kill your creativity is to start judging your songs before they've had the chance to develop. I'm a strong believer that creativity needs to happen without your critical side judging too soon in the process. You need to give yourself permission to write freely, to be creative without judgment. There's so much time later on in the process to refine and polish your work, and absolutely 100% say that you should do that process, but not at the time that you should be spending being creative. Even some of the biggest songwriters in the world start with messy drafts that they have to work on to develop into the songs that we know and love. So let's take Ed Sheeran's song The Shape of You for an example. Originally that song was being written for Rihanna. Not a lot of people know that. And the first version of that song was completely different to what we know has been released now. It didn't even have that iconic marimba rhythm. But when Ed was writing it, he wasn't feeling it, and instead of pitching something to Rihanna that he wasn't proud of and shutting himself down straight away, he kept working on it. He allowed himself to work through the process. He let the song evolve creatively. And if he'd spent time judging it too soon in the process, it may not have ever been released. Some songs will take some creative thinking to get you through the process, whereas others can be written really quickly. But when you hear a songwriter say, oh yeah, we wrote that song in like 20 or 30 minutes, they don't mean the final version that was released to that we know and love. What they mean is that the creative process to build that song in its initial creative phase happened quickly. I can guarantee you that it's gone through a rewrite process, a production, an arrangement process after that. The song came together quickly, but they all then get worked on later. And if you involve your inner critic in that creative process, it will just draw it out and sometimes just stops the creativity altogether, ruining your new song. So in those early stages, don't let your inner critic cut you down. Create without critique in these early phases and let your song become what it's supposed to be. So this is a big one. There are so many elements to a song, sometimes you just have too many choices to make. And that decision paralysis can stop you even starting a new song. You freeze and you don't know what to choose. It's like when I go to a restaurant and they have this ridiculously huge menu with way too many choices on there. I struggle to narrow it down to what I'm going to choose for my meal. And that's the analogy I use when starting a new song with so many different elements that you can choose and have to decide on. It can paralyze you. And that decision paralysis is often why you'll find songwriters write very similar songs. They're samey because the songwriter doesn't want to have to make all those decisions every single time. So they make very few decisions to change from what they wrote last time. Now I found a really good way of combating this, and that is to take some of those choices away. It's a great way to develop your songwriting and to experiment. So I tell a lot of the songwriters I work with to use a familiar chord progression, borrow a chord structure, borrow an actual song structure from a song that you know and love. Use a familiar rhyme scheme. In fact, Borrowing from existing songs is something that I really encourage you guys to do. Things like chord progressions, song structure, rhyme schemes are not copyrightable, so you can borrow them from other songs and use them in your own, as long as you're not borrowing too much at any one time. One of the best ways I suggest to do this is take one element from one song, another element from another song, and it takes away the choice paralysis and limits what you have to work with so that you're developing and experimenting in new ways every time you write a song. One of the greatest examples of this is using one chord progression all the way through your song. And a lot of songwriters I speak to hate this idea, and I don't know why. If we take an example of the song With or Without You by U2, it uses the same 4-chord progression, D, A, B minor and G, all the way through that song. But it doesn't feel repetitive because there's other elements involved. They shift the melody, there's an incredible dynamic build in the vocal delivery, and layers of instrumentation gradually add intensity, which is matched in the lyric and vocal delivery. I mean, it's all quite subtle, but it's never boring if you listen to that song. So by limiting the chord progression to be the same all the way through that song, when they wrote it, they had to use other elements to develop it and build an ebb and a flow into the arrangement. And in my humble opinion, makes that one of the best rock ballads of all time. Creative limitations can be liberating for your songwriting. They challenge you to think in new ways, so never get stuck in that decision paralysis. Make a choice, move forwards, and remember, the more you write, the easier it does get. Now, this is something I get asked about quite a lot. How do you know what you don't know? How do you know what it is you should know? And especially when you first start songwriting, it's actually really difficult to identify what you should be learning and what you should be trying out to develop your songwriting skills. You might not realise at this point that a small change in your rhyme scheme may make your lyrics flow a lot better, or a subtle melodic change could make your chorus more memorable. Now, this is a really interesting concept, and a lot of songwriters I work with really find it useful in developing their skills. You don't know what's possible until you explore it. It's why my advice is always to keep writing and write more songs. That's the best way I know to develop your songwriting skills. So how do you do that? Well, I'm a big believer in seeking out information from wherever you can. That may be songwriting books, blogs, podcasts, YouTube videos perhaps. You can study how your favourite songwriters craft their own songs, and you can join songwriting communities that maybe have some peer feedback for you on your songs you've already written. But the biggest thing I want to remind you is that don't forget to put into practice what you're learning. It's so easy to get stuck in the information absorption while you're songwriting and making decisions like, oh, I need to learn how to do this before I start writing songs. That is definitely not the case. Songwriting is a skill you develop by doing. And we've talked about it in another video, but taking the pressure off the songs that you're writing by choosing to write a throwaway song can really help you move forwards with what you're trying to learn and implement from the information you've got. When you take a new technique, such as writing with all perfect rhymes, then you can actually move forwards and develop that and use that every time you write a new song. These exercises really build your songwriting muscle. They give you hands-on experience that no amount of reading or watching can replace. And here's the thing, your learning as a songwriter should never stop. Even professional songwriters are constantly honing their craft. I saw an interview recently with Shane McNally, who has written over 50 number ones and is one of the most nominated Country Music Association songwriters of all time. And he teaches songwriting to new aspiring songwriters. He said in the interview that teaching new songwriters has helped him identify gaps in his own knowledge. And even though he's had so much success, he still learns while working with other people. And working with new aspiring songwriters has enabled him to keep his finger on the pulse of what's happening in music now and kept his own songwriting fresh and modern. And that's been instrumental, pun intended, in his own adaptability and success as a songwriter. Songwriting is a lifelong journey of growth and discovery. So I encourage you to stay curious, keep writing, and let yourself experiment fearlessly. Incidentally, I have a future video coming up that's planned about all my favourite songwriting books, podcasts and other resources, so make sure you subscribe if you're interested in that. Okay, on to the last point for today, and it's a pretty big one. One of the biggest mistakes songwriters make is that they think there's a correct way to write a song, and there isn't. I'll say that again. There is no right way to write a song. Some songwriters start with lyrics, while others start with the music. Some write alone, while others will only collaborate or co-write. And despite what some people might tell you, there is no hit song formula. Yes, there are trends in music, but there is no one foolproof way to write a hit song. There's also no one single way or method of songwriting that suits everyone. Sure, there's common techniques that some people call rules, but actually these are more like patterns of what tend to work or currently trending at the moment. I like to think of them more as tools instead of rules. And here's the thing, what works now is not what will work in the future and what hasn't worked in the past. Things are evolving, music evolves constantly. Just look how songwriting has evolved over the years. In the 1950s, songs were often written for dancing because that's what people wanted. And with the rise of electronic instruments in the late 70s and 80s, it changed the landscape of songwriting because it introduced new sounds and structures. Digital recording and CDs in the 90s allowed for longer albums and different song arrangements. And today, streaming music and TikTok have reshaped the song structure. We see shorter intros, quicker hooks, and a more immediate impact. So don't get bogged down with thinking that you need to be doing it right, because there is literally no such thing. If you get stuck in that mindset, you'll start second guessing yourself, and that's when that pesky inner critic starts creeping back in. Instead, focus on what feels natural to you. Experiment with different techniques, but don't let the rules hold you back. Great songs come from all different processes, and the only wrong way to write a song is to not write songs at all. Okay, so that's my list of things that I would love you guys to avoid when you're writing new songs. To sum it up, don't be critical too soon, don't overthink your decisions, and embrace creative limitations. Keep learning and putting your learning into practice, and don't stress about doing it right. The fact you're doing it at all is exactly the right way. If you've got any value out of this video at all, as a new channel, I would really appreciate a like. It helps us get these videos out to people who may need this information before they start writing their next song. And if you're looking for more, then check out this video here. It's all about idea generation and how you can find inspiration from anywhere. I'll see you in the next one.